Video game DLC is notorious for reskinning enemies when they need more fodder for players to tear through on their way to new content. Some like to accuse FromSoft of engaging in these practices, especially when it comes to Elden Ring. I think there's an argument to be made that reused assets can often dull some of the excitement when exploring a new place. But something I believe these games have always been able to do well is give us lore reasons for why we're fighting the same enemies again. We can encounter fire monks in Liurnia well before we meet them in the mountaintops, but it's not because the area needed enemy variety. It's because they chased Adon, Thief of Fire, to this part of the lands between. Godfrey the Grafted is most certainly a reason to throw us another Godric fight later in the game, but he also reveals a little more about Godwyn's lineage. In Shadow of the Erdtree, there was a reused enemy that I never gave a second thought to, because it seemed so blatant. I originally decided they didn't need their own video, but after closer inspection, I think their mere existence in this land tells us a little more about their base game counterparts. Today, we're going to talk about the Shadow Militia, and what we can learn about their place in this world, before their brothers made it to the lands between. Welcome back to Square Table Gaming, where we bring you the lore of Elden Ring and Night Rain every week. This week, we're sponsoring ourselves again by asking you to check out our Patreon. With the current state of YouTube, the channel's become pretty hard to sustain, so if you've ever enjoyed our lore dives, or just use us to fall asleep, please consider joining. Much like our memberships on YouTube, we're offering early access to our content, but at additional tiers, we've got new perks, like behind-the-scenes looks at our editing process, access to the scripts for all of our videos, and ad-free content. If you want to support the channel and enjoy our entire library ad-free, please consider signing up for the STG Patreon. With that said, let's discuss these misunderstood militiamen. In Elden Ring, the Vulgar Militia's armor tells us it is armor worn by lean, mean, and filthy militiamen, freshly singed battlegrounds effusing with the stench of the dead, forbidden lands that will be excised from the memory of history. This is where the Vulgar Militia serve, as untiring, unsung watchkeepers. They're also said to be the undecorated stewards of rancid, scorched battlefields that none dare approach, and forbidden domains better forgotten by the rest of the world. In essence, we saw the Vulgar Militia as scavengers of the battlefield. They would go to wherever there were dead bodies to loot and take what they could while also attacking travelers from the shadows with underhanded tactics, like smoke bombs and ambushes. However, with the context of Shadow of the Erdtree, I think it's important that we consider who is actually in charge of this militia. When making our way through the Shadowkeep, we find small men wielding the armaments of the Vulgar Militia just outside of where we face the Golden Hippo. The only discernible difference between them and the militia we know from the base game is the appearance of their armor. Rather than it being jagged, aged, and torn, it looks well maintained, almost regal by comparison. Its description is slightly different than that of the Vulgar Militia, telling us it is armor as dark as shadow, worn by Vulgar Militiamen, freshly singed battlegrounds effusing with the stench of the dead, forbidden lands that will be excised from the memory of history. What better place than the realms of Shadow, then, for such an army? Given its upkeep, and the description implying they're right where they belong, the Vulgar Militia originates from the land of Shadow, and is only seen as vulgar due to the Golden Order labeling them as such. While the Shadow Militia is found in the Gravesite Plains, a place littered with dead, they're also found in very particular areas of the land of Shadow, such as Shadow Altus, the bridge outside of the Shadowkeep, and the Specimen Storehouse. These members of the militia are not seen to be in opposition to Messmer's forces, and we know it's fairly normal to find factions on opposite sides of each other, fighting amongst themselves in the lands between. This tells us that Messmer's forces and the Shadow Militia were working together in a way that mutually benefited both parties. I don't believe that these men were among those that marched with Messmer into the land of Shadow, but their militia certainly joined forces with them along the way. We know the Hornsent cared little for those outside of their race, butchering shamans as they saw fit for their religious practices. So perhaps the militia was subjected to a similar kind of cruelty, which made them partial to following the Golden Order. While none of their item descriptions tell us anything that would solidify the lore behind their true appearance, their connection to Messmer's forces is undeniable. With that said, there is another place we can do battle with the Shadow Militia, just outside of the Divided Falls. The Divided Falls is where we find the entrance to the Darklight Catacombs, an area that leads to the Abyssal Woods, where the flame of frenzy has tainted the land, leading to Midra's Manor. These catacombs are defended by imps, spirit callers, and ultimately, Jori, the Elder Inquisitor. But before any can even reach the entrance, they're ambushed by the Shadow Militia. These members of the militia are not posted here because this is a place of death, where there are plentiful bodies to loot. In fact, they'd have a better chance of that in the Abyssal Woods themselves. No, they were stationed here for a reason, as the first line of defense, leading to a land effused with the stench of death. It's possible they were stationed here by Messmer, but if there was one thing the Golden Order and the Hornsent agreed on, it was the danger the frenzied flame posed to the world. So whether they were put there on the orders of Messmer, Marika, or the Hornsent, this was a station they were given, not a place they themselves chose to wait in order to ambush passers-by. If we accept the idea that the Shadow Militia is the original name of the Vulgar Militia, then the question becomes, how did they come to be known as Vulgar? I believe this is due to their ties to the Land of Shadow. I don't think any member of this militia was ever meant to be in the Lands Between when the Land of Shadow was locked away. If nothing else, this militia is made up of survivors, and I think it's fair to assume some may have even seen the writing on the wall and made their way to the Lands Between ahead of this event. From here, Queen Marika and the Golden Order couldn't have these men be known as the Shadow Militia. The Land of Shadows was supposed to disappear, become a footnote in history, only known to those who lived it. This place was meant to fade from memory, so the sins of Marika's past would stay buried forever. So the militia was slandered. They were not protectors. They were monsters who thrived in lands of battle and decay. Tales were told of the monstrous, vulgar militiamen who would carve you up with their long-bladed weapons and eat your flesh. This is why the Vulgar Militia saw tells us. The saw is said to also be used to cut up bodies to feed the militia, but there are no first-hand witnesses to confirm the dire rumor. There are no first-hand accounts because it's not true. It's Golden Order propaganda. I feel there is no greater evidence of this theory being correct than one of the areas we can face the militia in the base game of Elden Ring, along the path between the Forbidden Lands Grace and the Grand Lift of Rold. Upon using the medallion halves to activate the Grand Lift of Rold, we are taken to an area that looks much like the many catacombs found in the Lands Between. After walking out of this place, we are attacked by members of the Vulgar Militia, who again seem to be stationed here. Almost no one knew the secret of this lift, and it stands to reason that any who'd blocked this path were placed here on purpose. They defend the only corridor between the Tarnished and the Forbidden Lands, where we can find the entrance to Elphael, Brace of the Haligtree. Miquella was said to be creating a haven for all those discarded by the Golden Order, and the Vulgar Militia got the memo. After all, who is the only person who would know their true origins in the Land of Shadow and still offer them safe harbor? Miquella, the boy who sought to walk those lands himself. While it may not seem like much was told to us about the Shadow Militia through their armor and weapons, sometimes written lore just isn't enough to get the whole picture. By taking a closer look at where we fight these enemies, and why they would be found in these strange places that seem to run counter to what we know them for, we can better understand just how much of their lore is actually lies told by the Golden Order. The Shadow Militia fought alongside Messmer. They're not ransacking the land for its goods. The Vulgar Militia may sneak and steal, but they do it to survive, not out of some malicious, cannibalistic intent. These strange little men are another victim of Queen Marika and her crusade against the Land of Shadow. their history almost completely rewritten, with the only nugget of truth left to us being that they serve in forbidden lands that will be excised from the memory of history. The truth of these people has been hidden away so well that none of us playing the base game would have any way of knowing they were anything more than murderous little imps. Thank you for joining me as I revisited the Vulgar Militia now that we have the context of the Shadow Militia to better understand their whole story. What do you think the militiamen are? As even with this new information, we still don't know why they're so small. Do you believe the name Vulgar Militia is a bit of rebranding by the Golden Order? Why does the Shadow Militia stay loyal in the Land of Shadow? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comments. Watch that button light up as I say like this video, and if you think we've earned it, please subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss out on any of our lore dives. We look forward to seeing you again for more Elden lore.